From ancient castles shrouded in mist to remote villages where the line between reality and myth blurs, the legend of the vampire has spread terror for centuries. Immortal beings, living by night, thirsting for human blood, hiding in the shadows, with cold stares and razor-sharp fangs. It is said that just one look from them can stop your heart. Vampires, are they the creation of imagination or a buried truth in a blood-soaked history? Don't forget to subscribe to hear the chilling story of these creatures living among us, the immortal blood drinkers. A prince imprisoned in a stone fortress deep in shadowy Transylvania. When released, he was no longer human. The Dracula legend didn't begin with blood, it began with betrayal and darkness. And the cell where he was held still exists beneath Bran Castle. Would you dare enter? Bran Castle and the ghost of Vlad Țepeș, legend or blood-soaked reality. Bran Castle, perched high on a cliff in the Carpathian Mountains, is a structure so steeped in folklore that its name alone conjures images of blood, bats, and the undead. Though widely known as Dracula's castle, the true history behind this fortress is far more complex and chilling than any Gothic novel. Built in the 14th century to defend the strategic mountain pass between Transylvania and Wallachia, Bran Castle became a site of political intrigue, imprisonment, and, as some believe, unspeakable cruelty. At the heart of the legend lies a real historical figure, Vlad Țepeș, or Vlad the Impaler, Prince of Wallachia, infamous for his brutal reign and the horrifying method of execution that earned him his grim nickname. Though there is no definitive proof that Vlad ever resided in Bran Castle, historical documents confirm he was held captive there briefly in the 15th century. And once his shadow passed through its walls, a lingering darkness remained. Even centuries later, Bran Castle continues to be a place where history and myth fuse into one, drawing in thrill seekers, historians, and paranormal investigators alike. Built in 1377 by Saxon settlers under the order of King Louis I of Hungary, Bran Castle was constructed as a fortress, a customs post, and a defense stronghold. Its walls have witnessed sieges, betrayals, and secret negotiations. But they have also heard the screams of prisoners and the whispers of those long dead. Perched atop a rocky bluff, the castle overlooks a valley where mists roll in daily like a living veil. Inside, narrow stairways twist like serpents in cold. Stone corridors echo every step. Locals speak of these passages as if they breathe, exhaling chills and drawing in the heat of any living soul. That it is within these walls that the story of Vlad Țepeș became more than history. It became legend. Vlad III, known as Vlad Țepeș or Vlad Dracula, was born in 1431 in the citadel of Sighisoara. The son of Vlad Dracula, a member of the Order of the Dragon, his name originally symbolized honor and nobility, but it would soon be stained with unimaginable brutality. After enduring imprisonment and political upheaval in his youth, Vlad rose to power as voivode of Wallachia. His rule was marked by fierce resistance against the encroaching Ottoman Empire, But it was his method of instilling fear that has forever linked his name to darkness. Impalement. Victims were skewered through the body and left to die slowly, sometimes over days. Entire forests of impaled corpses were said to greet invading armies. Some accounts even claim Vlad dined among the dying. Whether seen as a ruthless tyrant or a national hero, one thing is clear. Vlad left behind a psychological scar that Romania still wrestles with today. In 1462, after a failed military campaign and betrayal by his allies, Vlad was captured by Hungarian forces under King Matthias Corvinus. He was reportedly held in Bran Castle before being transferred to Visegrad, where he spent years in captivity. It is said that during his confinement, he was kept in an isolated cell deep within Bran's lower levels. A narrow stairwell, long sealed off, may have been the only access. Chains were discovered in a chamber during 20th century restorations, still bolted to the wall, with strange markings etched in the stone, symbols of rage, despair, and perhaps madness. Some historians believe this period of solitude transformed Vlad, deepening the darkness within him. Locals whisper that the cell remains cursed, and no one should speak his name aloud while near it. Over the centuries, countless tales have emerged from Bran. Visitors and caretakers alike report disembodied voices, cold spots, and the sound of heavy boots pacing the tower halls that a guard in the 1800s claimed to have seen a man in Eastern armor, staring out a window, vanishing when approached. A tourist in 1997 fainted in the armory room after hearing what she described as a breathless scream right behind my ear. During an overnight documentary shoot in 2006, all recording devices inexplicably shut down. The only audio captured was a long, rasping breath followed by the faint words, "Still watching." Some believe these are echoes of Vlad's tormented soul. Others think something much older was awakened by his presence. When Bram Stoker published Dracula in 1897, he drew upon Eastern European legends and historical rumors. Though Stoker never visited Romania, the name Dracula and the aura surrounding Bran Castle inspired the myth that would grip imaginations. Worldwide, tourism surged, and Bran Castle embraced its dark fame. Though guides emphasize that Vlad likely never lived there, the myth persists. Portraits of Vlad hang on the walls. Souvenirs bear his name, and at night, visitors swear the castle still feels inhabited. But who, or what, might still dwell within? Bran Castle's basement remains the most chilling area. Cold seeps through the floors, even in summer. Some walls are rumored to be hollow. In 1973, a hidden chamber was discovered during renovations. Inside were shackles, a rusted dagger, and parchment fragments bearing faded ink point one passage read, "He took my brother. He drinks the darkness. He will not die." Locals recall animals avoiding the castle's lower courtyard. No birds nest in its eaves. In 2014, thermal scans revealed a large heat anomaly beneath the North Tower, but no excavation was ever authorized. What lies beneath Bran may never be known. Or perhaps it must not be known. Vlad Țepeș died in 1476 in battle, but his burial site remains a mystery. Some claim he was laid to rest in Snagov Monastery. Others believe his body was hidden by loyalists to prevent desecration. when a team unearthed the alleged grave in 1931. It was empty. To this day, Vlad's legacy is as alive as ever. Some say he became immortal through myth. Others say something darker transpired, that his soul fused with Bran Castle, and now neither one can rest. Was Vlad Țepeș just a brutal prince, or something far more sinister? Did his imprisonment in Bran awaken an ancient force, or forge one within him? Why was his grave empty? Where is his final resting place? Are the legends surrounding Bran Castle merely stories or warnings from the past? And if you hear a whisper while climbing its tower alone, will you dare turn around? The corpse did not decay, fresh blood still on its lips. Villagers claimed he returned to drink our blood. An Austrian officer witnessed it and couldn't explain. This became the first official vampire report in history. Could this be the first true vampire ever documented? The Vampire of Serbia, 1725. In 1725, in the remote village of Kisiljevo, Serbia, then part of the Habsburg Empire, a farmer named Petar Blagojevic died under seemingly normal circumstances. But within 8 days of his burial, 9 villagers died one after another, each claiming that Petar had returned from the grave to demand their blood. Panic swept through the village. A priest and an Austrian military officer were summoned. When Petar's body was exhumed, it was unnaturally preserved. Fresh blood stained his lips, and his hair and nails had grown. The villagers requested to stake his heart to prevent further attacks. This incident was officially recorded and sent to the imperial capital of Vienna. It is considered the first written account of a vampire in European history, marking the earliest documented use of the word vampire in German texts. On the night of November 7th, 1725, Petar Blagojevic, a middle-aged farmer who lived alone, died peacefully after a brief fever. No foul play, no strange symptoms, merely a man whose time had come. He was buried in the village cemetery in accordance with local traditions. But 3 days later, his neighbor Novak had a terrifying dream. Petar stood beside his bed, scratching at the window, calling his name. The next morning, Novak was found dead. Blood from the ears, his mouth frozen mid-scream. Within 8 days, 8 more villagers died, all under similar circumstances. Pale skin, cold flesh, bruises on the neck, and congealed blood in their mouths. Every one of them spoke their final words before death. Petar came back. Kisiljevo descended into terror. Villagers lit fires through the night, hung garlic at doors, placed crucifixes, and stuffed grave dirt into their shoes. Folk rituals meant to ward off a strigoi, the undead drinker of blood. The local priest, Father Protanovic, sent a desperate letter to the Habsburg garrison, warning, if no one comes, the villagers will burn the corpses themselves. The dead are not resting. An Austrian officer, Ernst from Bald, was dispatched, with 2 soldiers, a civilian physician, and a scribe. His mission, to investigate and suppress irrational hysteria. At dawn on November 16th, under the watchful eyes of the villagers and church officials, Petr Blagojevic's grave was opened. According to Officer Frombold's official report, the corpse was intact, not decomposed. Hair and nails had grown, eyes half open, fresh blood pooled at the mouth. When the stake pierced the heart, the body lurched upright, gave a groan, and blood gushed from the chest. The eyes rolled back only then. The scribe fainted. The villagers dropped to their knees. Petr's body was burned to ash immediately. The ashes were buried deep, surrounded by salt and marked with crosses. 9 rounds of prayer followed. Frombold concluded in his final dispatch, "I cannot explain this by medical logic, but I saw the blood, and fear, true fear, is no fantasy." The report was filed to Vienna, and for the first time, the word vampire entered recorded history. Father Prodanovich remained in Kisiljevo, but every year on Petr's death date, the church doors would creak open, and altar candles burned with blue flames that in his final journal, he wrote, "We buried Petr, yes, but what rose was no longer a man. It was something cursed." 1 year later, the priest was found dead, bite marks on his neck. No one dared exhume his body. Today, Kisiljevo appears ordinary. Yet centuries later, paranormal researchers report similar phenomena. Footsteps at night, cold winds without cause, a shadowed figure wandering the graveyard at dawn. Old maps mark Petr's grave with an X. And a warning, do not disturb. A local legend persists. Call his name 9 times at midnight, and he will answer. This time, not for blood, but to reclaim his name. Why didn't Petr's body decompose like the others? Was it a case of post-death gas movement, or something truly undead? Why did vampire cases erupt across Eastern Europe shortly after this? Was Petr the first real vampire, or simply the first to be named? An ancient cemetery in the heart of London begins to stir. A towering shadow glides over tombstones in the fog. A corpse is found staked through the chest by unknown hands. Hundreds witnessed it. BBC reported it. Was this the last real vampire case of the modern age? The Highgate Horror. Highgate Cemetery, London, 1969 to 1970. An abandoned necropolis. Shadows, unearthed corpses, and a presence no one dared to name. Highgate Cemetery, built in 1839 in North London, was once a resting place for notable figures like Karl Marx. But by the mid-20th century, it had decayed into ruin, overgrown, forgotten, and haunted by legends that in December 1969, local papers began reporting strange occurrences. A tall shadow gliding between tombs, glowing eyes in the dark, and whispering voices from abandoned mausoleums. 1 year later, the case would explode into what the British media called the Highgate Vampire Panic. It involved 2 rival paranormal investigators, crowds breaking into the cemetery, and a corpse found with a stake through its chest. One December evening, 1969, a group of high school students walked past the rusted east gate of Highgate Cemetery. Among them, a student named David Farrant froze, his eyes fixed on a towering figure wearing a dark cloak and hat, standing silently. Among the graves, no footsteps, no breath. The figure glided through a stone wall and vanished into the fog, David told his teachers. They laughed until others began to see the same thing. Within weeks, over 20 local residents wrote letters to newspapers describing identical encounters. A tall, cloaked figure with glowing red eyes, skin pale as a corpse, a cold force following me, even during daylight. The press coined a name, the Highgate Vampire. Some delved into old London lore and found tales of an 18th century nobleman from Eastern Europe, buried at Highgate after dying under mysterious circumstances, never truly at rest. By early 1970, two well-known figures from the London occult scene announced investigations into Highgate Point 1. David Farrant, the first witness, a practitioner of Wicca and Spiritualism. Point 2. Sean Manchester, a self-proclaimed exorcist, who told the press, "I believe it is a real vampire, brought from Transylvania to London in a coffin, buried in Highgate." The investigation turned into a public rivalry. Both men appeared on radio and television, each vowing to destroy the vampire on the spring equinox of 1970. March 21st, 1970, spring equinox. Hundreds of people gathered outside Highgate Cemetery at night, armed with garlic, crucifixes, stakes, and torches. Both David and Sean arrived. Reporters and even BBC camera crews were present. As night fell, someone screamed. A broken tomb glowed with a pale, eerie light. Dozens broke into the cemetery. Police arrived to control the chaos, but the next morning, a grave was found disturbed. The coffin opened. Inside, a female corpse, mutilated, with a wooden stake through her heart, and a one claimed responsibility. In the 6 months following the event, a girl named Lucia claimed a voice from the crypt called to her. She fell unconscious and remained in a coma for 3 days. A man named Edward, who had trespassed at Highgate, died of sudden heart failure. His mouth was filled with clotted blood. A blinded cat corpse was found laid atop Karl Marx's grave. Farrant continued investigating, but was later arrested for grave disturbance. Manchester claimed to have found the vampire's lair and destroyed it in secret. No proof was ever shown. In 1973, leaked documents from local police revealed at least 4 desecrated graves, with corpses tampered in unexplained ways. A confidential note from an officer. The public may believe in folklore, but something very real is terrifying them. A sketch included in the file depicted a 2-meter shadow with no face, glowing red eyes, and no footprints, matching witness reports. Highgate Cemetery has since been restored. Guided tours are held, except in the eastern wing, where the alleged events occurred. When asked, one groundskeeper said, "It's not about safety. That place just doesn't like visitors." A local legend says, "Stand between the twin graves, whisper his name 3 times, and you won't return." What exactly was seen at Highgate? Mass hysteria or something truly supernatural? Who desecrated the grave? And why was the corpse staked? Why did those involved suffer mental breaks, sudden illness, or disappear entirely? And if it was all imagination, why is the grave still sealed and left untouched? A green headscarf and a spirit still seeking justice. Tiny footprints appear at 3 a.m. across wooden floors. A ghost photo verified by Kodak experts. 12 people dead. No family lasted more than 3 years. Is this curse real, or just a haunting echo of a bloodstained past? The Curse of Myrtle's Plantation. A southern plantation shrouded in moss and silence. A green headscarf, a wrongful death, and a shadow still roaming the halls 2 centuries later. Myrtle's plantation was built in 1796 by General David Bradford, located in St. Francisville, Louisiana. Once a grand cotton plantation powered by slave labor, it has since become one of the most haunted homes in the United States. The estate is connected to at least 12 unexplained deaths, countless paranormal accounts, and one name whispered again and again: Chloe, the wrong slave girl in the green headscarf. In the early 1800s, the first families to live at Myrtle's plantation began to feel something was wrong. Every night, footsteps echoed along the creaking wooden halls, doors locked themselves, and once, a guest saw a disembodied hand pull the curtain aside at midnight. First, they blamed servants or rats. But when the piano in the drawing room played a single key repeatedly for 10 straight minutes, the fear became real. One lady of the house claimed she saw a black woman in tattered dress and a green scarf standing beside her bed at night, then vanish into darkness. Her name was Sarah Woodruff. She died of sudden asphyxiation in her sleep just months later. Chloe was a black slave girl, forced to serve in the main house. According to legend, her master, Clark Woodruff, coerced her into intimacy. One day, catching her eavesdropping on a private meeting, he punished her by cutting off her ear. Chloe began to wear a green headscarf to hide the disfigurement. Witnesses later said something had changed in her eyes, no longer fear, but cold hatred. Some believe Chloe baked a birthday cake for the family, laced with poison. Sarah Woodruff and her 2 young daughters died in agony. Chloe was caught. But it wasn't Clark who punished her. The other slaves hanged her from a tree, trying to distance themselves from her actions. But to this day, no one is sure Chloe was guilty. The curse, however, began with her death. After Chloe's death, at least 12 people died under strange circumstances on the property. A lawyer was shot dead on the front porch, his killer never identified. A 7-year-old girl, before dying of fever, described a woman in a green scarf who sang to her each night. A guest family suffered burns when flames erupted from the wooden floor. No source of ignition found. Every new owner since has either sold the house in fear or fled. No one lasts more than 3 years. One of the most cited pieces of paranormal evidence is a photograph from 1992. It shows a transparent figure of a black woman in headscarf standing between 2 outbuildings. Kodak experts reviewed the photo, no signs of tampering. Visitors have also recorded a lullaby sung by a woman, echoing from a mirror in the master bedroom. But when played backward, it whispers, "You should leave." A French journalist reportedly left the plantation after only 5 hours. His report read, "I don't know if it was ghost, memory, or madness, but I will not return." One chilling phenomenon: the front door often locks itself. Keys remain on the table. The lock is fine, yet the door won't budge. For locksmiths have tried, none succeeded in explaining it. The current owners also report childlike footsteps running through the house at 3 a.m. Though there are no children. One night, they scattered baking flour across the wooden floor. By dawn, tiny footprints led from the nursery to the front door and vanished. Some skeptics argue that Chloe never existed. No records of her name in slave registries. But then why does the 1992 photo remain unexplained? Did police respond to multiple unlawful entries with no evidence of break-ins? Do visitors experience chills, unease, or outright panic upon reaching the second floor? Multiple exorcists and psychics have tried to cleanse the home. None stayed longer than one night. Today, Myrtle's plantation operates as a historic bed and breakfast, welcoming visitors brave enough to spend the night. Chloe's room is the most requested, yet also the most frequently abandoned at midnight. One guest wrote on a travel blog, "I woke at 2 a.m. and saw a black woman standing at the foot of the bed. I turned on the light, no one there, but the green scarf was on the table." Did Chloe poison the Woodruffs, or was she framed in silence? Why do physical manifestations persist after 2 centuries? Is the curse in the land, in memory, or in the blood-soaked legacy of the South? And if this is just folklore, why do so many remember that cold presence standing just behind them in the dark? A corpse exhumed under a frozen full moon, blood still warm in her heart, cheeks flushed like life. Her dying brother forced to drink her heart's ashes. But was it a cure or the awakening of an ancient curse? This story is true, and her body still lies beneath Rhode Island snow. The Mercy Brown Vampire Case, Rhode Island, 1892. A family cursed by silent death. A corpse exhumed under a cold moon. And a ritual of fire and ash, meant to end a nightmare that may never have died. This story unfolded in Exeter, Rhode Island, in 1892, a time when tuberculosis, then called consumption, devastated families and sparked old-world fears of dark forces and the undead. One farming family, the Browns, watched their loved ones die one by one, while rumors spread that one of the dead was draining the life from the living. That name was Mercy Lena Brown, a 19-year-old girl who died of tuberculosis. But her death was not the end. It was just the beginning of a curse. In 1883, Mary Eliza Brown, wife of George Brown, died coughing blood. Within 6 months, their oldest daughter, Mary Olive, died in the same way. 9 years later, youngest daughter Mercy Lena began wasting away. pale skin, sunken eyes, and coughing. Blood day and night. She whispered, "They call me in my dreams. They want me to leave the bed." Mercy died in January 1892, but soon after, her brother Edwin Brown began to fall ill that he grew weak, pale, and sensitive to sunlight. Locals whispered, "Someone among the dead is not at rest." Under pressure from fearful villagers, George Brown consented to exhume the bodies of his wife, eldest daughter, and Mercy that on a bitterly cold March night, under a full moon, men gathered at the cemetery, carrying shovels, lanterns, crosses, and a butcher's knife. Mary Eliza and Mary Olive's remains had decomposed normally, but when they reached Mercy, they recoiled in horror. Her body was unnaturally preserved. Cheeks rosy, eyes shut like sleep, and when her chest was opened, fresh, liquid blood still filled her heart. Some witnesses claimed her lips moved. Following rural superstition, the villagers carried out a vampire banishment ritual. They removed Mercy's heart and liver. They burned the organs on a rock at the gravesite. They mixed the ashes into a tonic and forced Edwin, the dying brother, to drink it. This, they believed, would sever the bond between the living and the undead. Edwin died 2 months later, but the curse didn't end there. After the ritual, villagers reported ghostly figures in the woods near Mercy's grave. Some swore they saw a barefoot girl in white, walking under the moonlight, leaving no footprints in the snow that a woodsman claimed he dropped his axe in the forest, and when he bent to pick it up, he saw a pair of feet behind him. When he turned, no one. But he felt eyes on the back of his neck that a nearby family said that on every full moon, they heard ragged breathing outside their windows, even when snow covered the yard with no sign of disturbance. The Mercy Brown story made headlines across America. Newspapers called her the New England vampire, though she never harmed a soul. Doctors later argued her body hadn't decomposed because she'd been stored in a cold stone crypt during winter, a form of natural refrigeration. But that didn't explain the fresh blood or the untouched skin. Fear turned a sick young woman into a scapegoat, a myth, a legend of death and superstition.org. Maybe Mercy did return, and never really left Exeter. Mercy Lena Brown's grave still exists today, fenced off, quiet, lonely. The cemetery caretaker reports that whenever someone lights a candle by her grave, it always extinguishes halfway. In 1995, a paranormal researcher filmed a brief clip from behind the trees near the grave. A human-shaped shadow dashed past the frame, clear and fast, with no sound of footsteps. Ghost hunting teams who camped overnight near the grave left before midnight, claiming an overwhelming sense of dread and being watched. One team left a note on the gate. "If you are still not at rest, please forgive us." Today, Mercy Brown's case is preserved in the Rhode Island Historical Society archives, a dark chapter of American superstition. Author Stephen King cited Mercy's legend as the inspiration for his novel Salem's Lot. Modern science cannot agree whether Mercy was merely a victim of disease and ignorance, or if something else moved through that winter graveyard. Something that science still cannot name, because every year, on the brightest moon in Exeter, people still say they see her standing by her grave, watching, waiting. Why was Mercy's body the only one untouched by decay? Did the vampire ritual awaken something darker? Why do shadows and breath still linger around her grave? And have we truly understood death, or only scratched the surface of the curse that waits under the moon? A man buried with Christian rites, but for 16 years, under every full moon, he came knocking. Those who heard it died days later. The village panicked. They dug up his grave, and the corpse still bled. This isn't folklore. This is Europe's first real vampire case on record. Blood that never sleeps. The case of Jure Grando, Europe's first vampire, 1656. A man who died but kept knocking at doors. Cries in the night, deaths without cause, and a priest who dared face the darkness. This story takes place in the village of Kringa, in the region of Istria, modern-day Croatia, in the 17th century. Its central figure, Jure Grando Alilovic, is considered the first person in recorded European history to be identified as a vampire, documented by Johann Weichard von Valvassor in his 1689 historical chronicle. The documents say Jure Grando died from illness in 1656 and was buried with full Christian rites. But for the next 16 years, locals claimed he returned from the grave to haunt the village by night. Jure Grando was an ordinary farmer, living with his wife and son in Kringa. In 1656, he died of a high fever after 2 weeks of delirium. He was buried by Father Giorgio, the village priest. But only days later, one rainy night, his wife Ivana heard 3 knocks at the door. When she opened it, no one was there. But in the mud outside, she saw clear footprints. From that night on, people began hearing heavy breathing outside their windows. Children fell ill. Livestock died suddenly. And whenever someone's house was knocked on at night, they would be found dead within days. The first to die was Peter the blacksmith, found suffocated in his sleep with 2 deep bruised marks on his neck. An old woman named Maria swore she saw Jure standing near the village well at midnight, wearing a black cloak, pale as wax, eyes wide open. When a dead cow was unearthed, villagers found the soil around the body freshly disturbed, as if something had dug itself out. Father Giorgio suspected Jure Grando had become a strigoi, a kind of Balkan vampire that rises from the grave to feed on the living. For years, every full moon, Jure would knock on a door. Exactly 3 times that in 1663, villagers found Maya, age 38, dead in her home, face contorted as if strangled, yet there was no sign of entry. People began sleeping in groups, carrying crucifixes, and no one dared open the door if they heard knocking. The most terrifying part, no one ever saw Jure's face clearly, just a tall figure in a cloak, breathing with a rasp that chilled the heart. Father Giorgio and local hunter Miho Radetic gathered 9 men armed with crosses, axes, spades, and wooden stakes. They exhumed Jure's grave on a moonless night in 1671. When they opened the coffin, What they saw froze them cold. Jure's body was perfectly preserved. His face was flushed, his lips curled in a smirk, and fresh blood stained his chin. Miho tried to drive a stake through Jure's chest, but it bounced back, unable to pierce the skin. They sealed the coffin again. But from that day forward, Jure appeared more often. One winter night, Father Giorgio himself was the one whose door was knocked. He stood with a cross in hand. Jure appeared, a tall shadow, undefined face, eyes like endless pits. Giorgio shouted, "In the name of God, I cast you back where you belong." Jure let out a piercing scream, the first sound in 16 years, then vanished into the woods. The next morning, Giorgio led the villagers back to the grave with a heavy iron axe. They opened the coffin again and cut off Jure's head after several blows. The head came off. A dry, guttural moan echoed from the corpse. From that day forward, no more knocking, no more deaths. Though Jure was buried again with an exorcism, locals still report footsteps in the old church where he once prayed. Tourists sometimes photograph a shadowed figure near the ancient cemetery. Even when no one else is present. In 1973, a boy went missing near Jure's grave, never found. The last person to live next to the cemetery, an old woman named Danica, died of a heart attack after hearing 3 knocks during a stormy night. Jure Grando is known today as the first vampire in European written history. His name appears in 17th century chronicles across Austria, Italy, and Hungary. The modern-day Kringa built a vampire statue as a tourist attraction, but no locals dare walk through the cemetery after sunset. And still the question lingers: was Jure truly risen from the dead, or merely a victim of superstition and mass fear? What's unsettling is, his body was never burned, and no one knows for sure if he's done rising. How could his corpse remain intact after 16 years? Why didn't the wooden stake pierce his skin? What did the triple knock signify? And if he is still out there, could he rise again? They didn't drink blood. They were your dead relatives, still draining your life after death. As the living grew weaker, villagers dug up the dead. The heart still fresh, the cheeks still rosy. And so, they burned the heart and made the sick drink its ashes. The shadow in the lungs. The New England vampire panic, 19th century. Not folklore, not Hollywood fiction. This is a documented case. Corpses exhumed, hearts burned, ashes consumed, all because people believed the dead were draining the living. From 1780 to the late 19th century, across the New England region, including Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont, and New Hampshire, a bizarre wave of fear spread. Vampires were real, but these vampires didn't have fangs or drink blood. They were the dead who were believed to return spiritually and drain the life from their living relatives through some kind of evil breath or lingering essence. The real culprit, though unknown at the time, was tuberculosis, then called consumption, a deadly and incurable illness that claimed entire families in a few short years. But people didn't see a disease. They saw a curse. And to break it, they dug up bodies, burned hearts, and made the living drink the ashes. All of this is completely true and well documented. In 1810, in a small Vermont town, Mrs. Mercy Tillinghast died of consumption, what we now know as tuberculosis. Within a year, her two sons fell ill and died the same way. Her youngest daughter, Sarah, still lived, but grew weaker each day. Like her life was being drained, her father, desperate, became convinced that his wife was returning from the grave to take the children with her. And so, Mercy's grave was exhumed. The Tillinghast family wasn't alone. In village after village across Rhode Island and Connecticut, people noticed a disturbing pattern. One person died of consumption. Then, others in the family would fall ill in the same order, as if being hunted. Villagers believed the first to die had turned into something no longer human, a spiritual vampire. When graves were opened, people reported bodies still full of blood, cheeks still rosy, hearts still intact and moist. The only solution, they believed, was to burn the heart and feed the ashes to the sick. These rituals usually took place quietly at night, with the presence of a priest, a village doctor, and town elders. We opened the coffin and took out the heart. We burned it on stone until it was black ash. Then we mixed the ash into liquor and gave it to the sick. If they lived, their soul was saved. If they died, at least the vampire would claim no more. From testimony in Exeter, Rhode Island, 1892, this wasn't done out of cruelty. It was done out of desperate fear and ancient way to give death a name and a shape so people could fight it. Tuberculosis, marked by weight loss, pale skin, bloody coughs, sunken eyes, made people look like they were wasting away into undeath.to villagers. It made sense. The weaker my child became, the healthier his dead mother looked in the grave. Not every town resorted to exhumation, but in villages like Exeter, Jewett City, and Woodstock, more than 80 documented graves were disturbed. In many, bodies had been burned, hearts removed, skulls turned. Real procedures written into official records. The most infamous case was Mercy Lena Brown, who died of tuberculosis in 1892 at just 19 when her brother began wasting away with the same symptoms. Villagers in Exeter demanded Mercy's body be exhumed. To their horror, they found her corpse, still fresh, her heart full of blood. They burned the heart on a stone, mixed the ashes into a potion, and gave it to her dying brother that he still died. But Mercy became a national sensation. Newspapers across the country covered her case. The documents from her exhumation remain preserved in the U.S. National Library of Medicine, and many believe she inspired Bram Stoker's Dracula. By the early 20th century, when tuberculosis was understood and medicine improved, these rituals vanished. But in New England, people still remembered a time when death didn't end in the grave, and those buried may not have been done feeding. Today, scattered across the countryside lie unnamed, unmarked graves, those who were burned, mutilated, or torn apart in hopes of saving the living. Historians now call it the New England vampire panic. But if it was just panic, why were there legal records, medical files, and newspaper reports? Why did some corpses truly remain preserved for weeks, sometimes months? Was this simply a cultural coping mechanism, a way to explain the cruel mathematics of disease and grief? Or did something darker once walk among those forests and farms, something with no face, only a breath that drained life? In the end, even truth leaves shadows behind. Why did some corpses truly resist decomposition? Did anyone who drank the ash potion actually survive? If it was all superstition, why are many of these files still locked away in medical archives? And most haunting of all, if someone close to you became weaker every day and the dead looked fresher than ever, would you open the grave? If the legends of vampires gave you chills, remember, tonight is only a glimpse into the eternal darkness where they hide. Perhaps they never vanished, only waiting for the right moment to rise again. A glance in the dark, a cold breeze. Brushing your neck. Are you sure you're alone? The legend hasn't ended. It's only just begun. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel to keep following the eerie tales that await you ahead. See you again in the next Nightfall.